Welcome to the pilot episode of Just Another Tech Tip. Today we'll be going over how to make a navigation bar using CSS Sprites. As you can see, this nav bar has a chalkboard type appearance to it. Tools I'll be using to make this are Photoshop CS6, TextMate, and a web browser to check my work. Before we move into Photoshop, I just want to let you know that the background image I'll be using is a repeatable image I made from a much larger image of a blackboard. Now that we have that all out of the way, let's move on to Photoshop. Alright, here we are in Photoshop. So, first thing we want to do, obviously start a new project. Just name this CSS Sprite, and we can put width and height as 1000. That just gives us extra room. Okay, so first thing we want to do is set a black background. So next, let's just start and get the rounded rectangle tool. Change the color to white, and let's do a new layer and call this outline. Alright. So up at the top here, let's make our fill black, our stroke white. Let's make the stroke 2-point and a width of 650 and a height of 75. So let's do that, and then the radius of 10 pixels. Okay, so we've got that. Let's zoom in here. Alright, so now let's open this layer up and drop the opacity to around 20%. Okay, so we've got that. Now let's create another new layer and call this chalk outline. Okay, so now let's move over to our paintbrush tool. Go up here, and then the actual brush we want is right here. It is called the rough round bristle. It's my preferred one for a chalkboard effect. And then go up to the top and set the size to 15, whatever you want. Alright, make sure our color is white. And now before we start, we need to make a new layer, and we'll call this chalk outline. Okay. And then just go and trace around the border of this. Okay, so there we have the chalk outline. We can just hide that outline layer that we had before. Alright, now before we move on, let's make a new layer and call this one text. And let's move over to our text tool. Then up at the top you can see here the font I'm going to be using is Chalk Duster, and the size is 17 point. Alright, just start over here and we'll do about. So we've got that. Alright, looking good to me. So now let's move over to our paint bucket tool and fill that in. Alright, so let's take a look at this. Alright, looking pretty decent to me, if I may say so myself. And now, let's take these two and duplicate these two layers. Alright, so grab our pointer tool, just move that down as close as possible to there. Okay? So now we can take a look at this. It's looking good to me. Now what we want to do is create another new layer, and let's call this underline. Okay? Here, make sure that's at the top. Let's go back to our paint tool, our paintbrush, with the same settings as we had before, and we're just going to underline our about, contact, projects, and blog. Okay, so we've got that. Let's do a file, save. Make sure we save this. Is that? Okay. So now that we have this done, what we want to do is make it our actual size of the nav bar we want. So we're going to go up to Image, Trim. This is going to trim off everything around our image. Alright, so that makes it the smallest possible file and it'll fit. Now what we want to do is, because it's trimmed up, we don't want this border here. Let's see if I can get a better tool. Command Z. Okay, we don't want this border right here being highlighted as well. So what we want to do, go to Chalk Outline Copy and simply hide it. Before you save the PNG, turn off this background layer. Now go to File, Save As, and I'm simply going to save over. Alright? That way it'll blend in well with our chalkboard background without having black around it. Okay, also before we move on to the code, we need to make sure we do one thing. We need to find out exactly how wide this entire image is, and we need to find out how tall it is and how wide each individual piece is. So what we want to make sure we do, go to Window, Info, alright, and then grab this Marquee tool, and let's find the height of this first. So find the lowest portion of it, alright, and you can look up here. It's going to be 86 pixels tall. Write that down, copy it, whatever you want to do. Now we want to find out just how wide the about is. So we can see the width is 149. Okay, so you can see here we have all of our code. Yes, I'm going to explain all of that. And we have our project at this point. Okay, you can see it's rough around the edges. We have some issues down here and over here. We'll take care of that together. So let me go through this code and explain it. First, I have a basic HTML5 document. We set our title. I have the character set, the style. I put inline, not inline, but I put the style on this in the header of this just for ease of this video. You can easily put this in an external style sheet and link to it. And then down here we have our list. So I'll go through the list first. Okay, so it's just a basic unordered list with an ID of nav list, alright, which we reference up here. Then here we have the list items, so list with an ID of about, ID of contact, ID of projects, and blog. Then inside of that we have where our actual link would go, so we have an href, which is hyperlink reference, to whatever we want it to actually go to. Right now it's just going to a £, which means it doesn't change and it doesn't break anything. Okay, let's go into the style sheet, which is the real guts of this. Alright, up here first is basic, just our background image. So we have on our body, the background image is bg.jpg, which is my repeatable background image I told you about in the beginning. Then here we have our background repeat all of that, just make sure it continues to repeat. Okay, here we have our first line for the actual nav list itself. We have position set as relative. That allows us to have absolute positioning inside of it, which I'll show you on the next line. And then this portion right here is purely just to center it within the web page for this demonstration. But we have a width of 660, which is approximately how wide it is, margin left and margin right, which actually does the centering portion. Now let's move on to the next line. So we've got navlist li. That starts referencing the other things. Here we've got a margin top, 28 pixels, that gives us this space up here. We have padding of 0, list style none, which actually gets rid of the bullet points that normally are with a list, position absolute, and then top 0. Now moving on, nav list and nav list attribute. So here we have, this is how tall our actual pieces are. So we've got a height of 86, which, like I told you before, we have to measure that. So that's where you put your height measurement in, and then display block. So now we're going to move into each piece individually. So for the list item with the ID of about, we reference right here. So this left means that it is all the way to the left. So, and then the width we took as well, which was 149 pixels, is this right here. So whatever your width was for that, put that. Background URL is our CSS Sprite.png. And then we have our, right here is how far left oriented it is and how far up or down. So since that's all the way to the left and all the way to the top, it's 0, 0. We'll see that change as we go along. Next we move on to contact. Here you can see that left is 149. So we move, it starts, the contact starts where the about ends. So we put the width for about in for left for contact, and then the width we measured for contact we want to put in there, so which was 196 for me. Alright, and then the background URL, this portion is going to shift the actual image itself, so we want it to move left 149 pixels, but it's still on the top row, so we leave the height adjustment at 0. Now moving on to projects. So left you can see it's 345, and that's going to be this 149, that is how wide about is, plus 196, so add the about width plus the contact width, and that's going to be how far left your projects is going to be. Alright, and then here we have the width, which is what we measured for projects. Alright, also for projects we have the background URL, and then this negative 345 as well, just like the left, and that's going to move the image 345 pixels to the left. That way we have that lined up. Alright, and 0 as well because it hasn't moved down. Lastly, we have blog. So left you can see is 545. Now that's going to be the 149 plus the 196 plus the 200, and that gives us our left value. And then width is what we measured within Photoshop. Excuse me. Alright, so then we move on, same thing here, negative 545, same as the left value. Just a negative at that point. Also because it's on the top, 0. Now we move on to the about attributes. Or, sorry about that, the actual hover attributes. So when you hover over an image, it actually pulls up this new image. Okay, so here we have, you want a colon hover, alright, that tells it that when you're hovering over it, do this, and it's just like the bottom line of every one of these, okay, except it's got the hover now. So it's background URL, that's all the same, and then here it's 0 pixels, just like right here, it's 0, but now it's negative 86. Okay, and that's going to tell it it's the next one down. That's why we had to make sure we took the height measurement. Alright, so then we do that for the rest of them. And just like above, contact negative 149, negative 149. We just have to throw in that negative 86 instead, and so on and so forth. Okay, so that's going to give us this little bit here. Alright, so you can see here that we have a little bit showing up there. So what I want to do, just to test it, let's change this down to negative 84. Save that, refresh, and you can see it's good. Alright, so I'm just going to change that for all of them. Okay, so let's check that again. Good, good, good. And then lastly we have this little issue on the blog portion. So that's just, it's a little bit too wide. So if we take the width, alright, so from 117, let's drop it down to 115. Alright, not quite there, so let's go back here, drop it down just one more pixel, and that should take care of our issue. Save that, move over, and refresh, we're good. Alright, and that is making a nav bar using CSS Sprites. Also, if you guys are interested in finding a web designer for your website, check out spencercarley.com. Also, follow me at Twitter, at SpencerCarley. I will drop links to both of those down in the description. Really appreciate you guys taking your time to view this video. Alright, thanks and have a great day.